Good stuff.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here today. My name is Kevin Levine. I work for Hyatt Hotels in New York City. My title is Associate Director of Colleague Relations for New York City, and I support 5 hotels in the city. My home base is the Grand Hyatt New York, which is on Grand Central, so that's where I spend most of my time, and then I travel throughout the city to my other hotels as well. And, hotels are in a bad situation right now. Unfortunately, all 5 of my hotels are in a suspended operation situation. So things look a little different now than when I first started using Coda and what it was for. But it has really helped us kind of stay on the same page with a lot of the coordinating that we've had to do in terms of mass communication and just kind of all the technical challenges with having, hundreds of people on temporary layoff and all the changes happening there. But I started with Hyatt 16 years ago. I will tell you that Hyatt as a company doesn't necessarily use Coda. It's a product that I've adopted for our use. It's, it's one of the many steps in the evolution of how we operate. We've started from using, for some of our functions, just using like a Word document to write down some keywords. And then we've evolved all the way. We went from a Word document with just some text to Wunderlist to Google Sheets for some tracking. And then we went to OneNote for a bunch of things since, we have Microsoft subscriptions. And then from OneNote, we moved into Trello, and then we've kind of hopped around for some other things. And, we have a little bit of everything in a little, in different places. And so Coda's done a great job over the past few months of kind of bringing it all together. And so we've been using it since March, and then, the shutdown happened a few weeks after that, but it's continued to adapt with us, which is really great. I started in operations with hotels. So I spent the first 12 years working in housekeeping and front office from small hotels in Rhode Island all the way to Grand Hyatt New York, where I was also executive housekeeper overseeing 300 employees directly for day-to-day operations. And then about 4 years ago, I moved into human resources, which I really, really love. It's definitely my calling and my passion. And, my goal has always been to just have more and more people that I can try and, help and influence. And so getting to support 5 hotels is really the largest extent of getting to do that and trying to make people happy across the city.
Sweet. Have you seen, what are the key things that you like about, or what are some of the differences and similarities between HR and operations that you found for the hotel?
So, it's the same colleagues, right? The same people who you would work with day to day in the operations. Those are the same colleagues that come to you in human resources that need help. And me having that background of having worked in the operations in the hotel really helped bridge the relationship with the colleagues that then needed help from a human resources stand. So I already had a good rapport with them and, kind of understood their needs, and I wasn't just a stranger to them or only got to see them when there was a problem. So it really helped me succeed in my role in human resources, being able to know who they were for the past couple of years and then help them in whatever the new challenges were that they were having.
Cool. So yeah, you mentioned a variety of tools, and I guess I wanted to hone in a little bit about what kind of problems you were trying to solve back in March before the pandemic hit. Like, what were some of those, operational or organizational challenges you were trying to solve, and how Coda kind of came into the picture and all that stuff?
So, pre-COVID, we would hire people at the hotels, and not so much now, but the process for hiring people is pretty complex in New York City with union environments. There's a lot of rules we have to follow in accordance with our union agreement, but then we also have to make sure we're meeting city and state laws and following proper procedures. And it's crucial that as an area function that all of our hotels are operating pretty similarly and we're being consistent so that, we all know where we're at and we're all following the same process. And so being distributed across 5 hotels can be very challenging. Everyone's, a different hand operating in different ways. And so Coda has really helped kind of bring that together specifically for the hiring process, again, before COVID, as well as meeting notes and just centralizing meeting notes, making sure that everyone had access to the information they needed. One of the challenges we face is just being distributed across the city is that we're siloed to our home hotels. So if I'm based out of Grand Hyatt New York, that's where my access is tied to. So if somebody is based out of an Andaz hotel, their access is tied to that. And it's very difficult from a corporate level to share access across hotels. So if my colleague in an Andaz hotel is working on something, it's very hard for me to get access to that. And so bringing it out of our network system, which corporate is not always a huge fan of, but we try to be very conscious about what information is going into Coda, so we're not violating any confidentiality or HIPAA or anything like that. So it's more the important information that we need on hand, and also making this information accessible on a cell phone is crucial for us. You know, we may be in a meeting and we need to access some of the information from previous meetings or hiring status for where we're at, and just being able to access that mobily is great. And honestly, Microsoft doesn't have a great solution for that right now. You know, they're about to put out Microsoft Lists and they have Microsoft Planner, but they just all have their downsides that we've never been able to solve all of our problems and have it accessible mobily.
When you say like you're tied to a specific location, like is that like if you wanted to see an Excel file from a different hotel, like you couldn't open it if you're in a different hotel?
Not exactly. Someone would have to go in and share that file specifically with me.
Oh, I see.
But that becomes very complicated when there's a team. There was a team of 20 of us before the shutdown. And so trying to make sure information is available to everyone at once as needed was very challenging, especially with turnover, right? Somebody leaves, somebody goes. If the person who left was the one with the access to something, it becomes very challenging to get access back to that.
Gotcha. Interesting. Anyone else have questions for Kevin on his background before we go dive into his docs? Anyone?
I guess this is more about personality than it is about specific experience, but what do you think drew you to Coda in particular? Like, what was sort of your product magic moment?
So I'd shared this with Al previously, but I was using a competitor's platform, which it got blocked by corporate at some point. So I had to. You
can say the competitor. It's okay.
All right. So we were using Notion, and Notion has its strengths, but it also has its opportunities. And I wasn't even aware of Coda. So when Notion got blocked at our company, I sent a tweet to the YouTuber of the Keep Productive channel, Francesco D'Alessio, I think is his name. And I said, hey, this is what I was doing. It got blocked. Can you offer any alternatives? And he said, check out Coda. And it just kind of clicked. And I reached out to my brother, and he had been using it as well for his work. And so it was just kind of a no-brainer to kind of transition. It does very similarly, but also it's so much more user-friendly and pleasant to look at and use, and easier to convince people to use. And so some of the automations that I use for task reminders is something that I was really lacking from Notion that I really, really appreciate having. I get certain reminders every day just about payroll processes or certain administrative functions that I probably would have forgotten or had to write down elsewhere. So those automations and the buttons on the canvas are just so valuable, and you'll see a few of those in our demos, but that flexibility and just the connection to Google is just extremely helpful, whereas Notion has no API. It's very hard to get information in and out of there.
Awesome,
cool,
thank you.
I guess Diane had just chatted in. What do you do when you're not online? I assume this when you're not online, like with your Coda doc. Like, have you used Coda offline? Diane, feel free to chime in if I'm not asking your question correctly.
Yeah, that's correct. I was just wondering, I mean, what happens if you're not on the internet and you want to access your data?
That is a good question. I don't know that I faced that situation too recently. When we travel from hotel to hotel and we're in the subway underground is probably the only time we don't have access to the internet. So thankfully I haven't faced that challenge too often yet, but I think that is a common problem for most platforms. Maybe Trello has a decent amount of offline support, but Notion doesn't, Microsoft Planner doesn't. And so most things that provide similar features just don't have a great solution to that yet.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Diane. Anybody else? All right, I think it's a good time to dive into your docs, Kevin. So
all right,
the floor is yours if you want to share your screen. And yep.
Will do. So for everyone who said they were not a 3 in Coda, I am not a 3 either. I'm probably more like a 2, and none of my documents are too complicated except for maybe the first one I'll show you. So hopefully this kind of shows you that it's doable to get in and kind of make the things that you need to make. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so these are some of the docs that we use. We're again, we're kind of distributed in different functions, whether it's labor relations or operations or the hiring process or the onboarding process. So this is just kind of a list of the ways that we use it for some of our team members. So I will start by showing you the talent process. So the way that our talent acquisition process works, pre-COVID, we had a team of people designated to that, and they would lead the process for hiring for all 5 hotels. And we found some challenges with the old way, which was one manager in an area who needed someone, they would just send an email to one person. So if that person was on vacation, maybe that email sits there and we don't act on it fast enough, or they were sending an email to multiple people and multiple people were restarting the same process. So we streamlined the process. What we did was we made a Google form. So it's just job requisition requests, and you pick the hotel, put in the information that you need, the position, departments, some of the basics, the reason for opening, if it's a temporary position, how long you need it for, and then who the hiring manager is, who the contact would be. So we, previously when we were using Trello, this was creating a Google entry on a Google Sheet, which we were then using Zapier. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with Zapier, but it kind of automates and connects systems in a very nice way. So we were using it to send that response into a Trello board and to create a card, but we're able to do the same thing with Coda and probably a little more smoothly as well. So we take those responses, they hit a Google Sheet, and then we set it up so that the Google Sheet sends a message into Coda, into the board that we've chosen to send specific information. So I'll show you an example of what it's doing. So those questions from the Google form, I tell it where to feed into, what table it's going into, what document, and then some of the other information here. So I typed in what fields to pull in, and I'll show you what that looks like as it comes into Coda. So all of our managers across the 5 hotels would use this form, and then we see the end result, which is a card being added to the open positions list. And then the hotel, some custom formatting based on that hotel's hero primary color. So the Grand is red. And so that card comes through here, and it has all the information that somebody filled out. So they filled out the position, they filled out some of the other information that we need so we can get started on it. Give me one second, let's see if I can find another. These are just some dummy ones. So this is the information that comes in, right? So what type of position it is, what department. So I preload that, you pre-type that information where it says type department, and then you just match up the fields into the correct spot. And that way it comes through here. So the other thing that we have going on here, the person that's assigned to that requisition, so whoever from the talent team is going to handle that position, as well as the effort level, which was something that is a really cool thing that's helped us, I think, from advancing from the prior system in Trello. So by assigning an effort level, we can better understand the distribution of work or who's overloaded on too many tasks or too many open positions. So all those sit here, they fall into the open position, and this is where we start the process. Now we do have an internal hiring system at Hyatt, but it doesn't really help for the before and the after process. So once this moves through the process, we move it into the hired field. And then once it's hired, we schedule it for orientation. And then if we have any active temporary positions or upcoming terminations, it kind of sits here. So being able to see all 5 hotels open positions is really important, because we need to know what's going on around the city, not just one hotel, or to better understand which hotel needs the most support instead of looking at it as, again, a siloed situation. And then the graphs, the charts is a nice addition that we lacked in all the other platforms we were using. So just being able to see which hotels have the most open positions or where we need to put the most effort and say, okay, the Grand is falling behind. We need to focus a lot of effort on them versus the Park Hyatt or the Hyatt Centric Times Square. And then this is the effort distribution. So based on who it's assigned to, and we can see how many positions are assigned to them, and you can select what that effort is, but then just to get an idea to say, okay, in this case, Stephanie is pretty stacked up, and I have some room that I can probably take the next position instead of giving another one to Stephanie. So just a way to better distribute the work. And then just some other ways to look at the information. So if I want to say, just show me all the open positions in the city, and I can get a quick look here. And then each hotel has an on-site HR manager or rep, and they would have a weekly call with the talent team, again, pre-COVID. So if I was at the Hyatt Centric Times Square, I want to just filter this to just the Hyatt Centric positions, because as the Centric HR person, I'm only really concerned with this, whereas the talent team as a whole function is more concerned with what's going on in the city. So filtering that view down to Centric Talent and being able to see all the open positions just based on the hotel field is some really nice accessibility there. So that's probably the most complicated board page we have when it comes to using a Google form, connecting it to Zapier, and then feeding into here. But Zapier is free for the first, I think, 100 zaps a month. And so we would never really get more than that. So this is a very good free solution for us across the board, whether it's from Google into Zapier into Coda. Any questions on that one?
I have a bunch, but I'll see if anyone else wants to chime in. I'm always like curious about processes and workflows. So, yeah, anyone want questions? I will ask the first one is, did this replace the Trello that you had originally?
Yes, so this was being created right before the shutdown. So it didn't get too much use, but it was the same process in Trello, but this gave us the flexibility of understanding the distribution, getting all of the hotels into one board, whereas previously in Trello, we had 5 different boards for each hotel, so that it was kind of easier to see it distributed, but having it feed in here and then filter it separately as a native feature was a huge step up, because Trello doesn't really let you combine boards in any way. I think they're about to introduce some features that do let you, but they're not even free and they're not out yet. So being able to see everything in one shot and then filter it was a huge plus, in addition to a chart to see the full distribution. And then really the effort distribution was something we were struggling with, that this really solves in a very simple, easy to see way. So it's just so obvious to say, okay, Stephanie shouldn't take the next position, it should go to Kevin. Whereas before it was a little more siloed to know who was doing what.
Mm-hmm. And then the effort, would that be just something like you or Stephanie kind of just like take a swag at when the requisition comes in? Like, this feels like a 1 or feels like a 3?
Yeah, it might have to do with the position level. So an executive level, meaning there's some more background to, or more people to interview, might be a higher level effort than a frontline colleague. With our partnership with the union, we have to go through the union first for certain positions that are covered under our contract. So there's not a lot of effort in that, and saying, hey, I'm opening a position for a room attendant. They send you the interviews over a couple of days, and then most of the time we choose one of those. Whereas we're scouting out a position, or we're sourcing on multiple websites, or we're doing a lot of interviews, flying someone in to interview, or really high level exec positions are probably more high level.
Cool. And this is, I guess, more kind of like a business question, but since all the hotels are closed, what kind of positions are you hiring for at the different hotels?
So right now we're not, they're not. There's unfortunately many hundred employees waiting to get back to work, and they're anxious. And we talk to them on a regular basis, and they're as anxious as we are to get them in and get guests in the hotel and do what we've all been doing for decades at this point. So we miss them dearly, and hopefully we'll get back to a point where we need to open positions, but we're just not there for the next few months at least.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. If there's anyone else have any questions?
Hey, Lamel here. Can you all hear me?
Oh, hey. Yeah, Lamel, how you doing?
Good. Could you talk a little bit about your process of getting to this design? Did you have prototypes or MVPs that you floated in front of stakeholders?
So this started with just managing emails, and then we'd have regular meetings with the talent acquisition team and say, okay, what do you have? What do you have? What do you have? Then it migrated into a Google Sheet where we would use a form, it would go to a Google Sheet, but then it became very difficult to continue to update that Google Sheet and filter it out and add multiple comments. So maybe I make one comment, spoke to this candidate, or left a voicemail for this candidate. And that became very troubling with Google Sheets, because you can't really expand the cell too much as you can do with an Airtable or a Coda or some other platforms. And so that need was there. And it was also very easy to make mistakes with just a Google Sheet and multiple people using the Google Sheet. So we found, I had been introduced to Trello for some other functions, really just like a to-do list. And then I realized after looking at some other people's use cases for Trello that it could be a good solution to managing the talent process. So this looks similar to what our Trello board looked like, but all the other things around it, the filtering, the distribution, and the charts is the cherry on top that Coda gives us. So it's just kind of the evolution of where are we making mistakes or where do we have those opportunities, and then going out and finding what tools are out there to solve that.
I guess when you first, just kind of piggybacking off of Lamel's question, like when you first built this, like did it just start off as like a table of active positions and then you kind of played around with the different layouts to get this Trello look, or?
Well, it started in Trello, so it just started that way after we moved from Google Sheet. And so when I saw that Coda has the same or similar board layout with the cards like this, it was attractive in a sense. Oh, we can bring it all into here and then use the filtering of different views of the same table, which again, most other platforms are lacking that view of a table. That's a mirror image in real time from multiple places, to filter it down.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, just like some inside information, we are actually going to be pushing out some new updates to the card layout here, so it's going to look a lot different and hopefully better for everyone out there who likes this kind of board with cards layout. So stay tuned for that.
That's exciting.
Yeah. If there's nothing else, do you want to move on to the next doc?
Sure. So the next one I'll show is the onboarding, which might be helpful for some of the other hospitality folks. So this is a process that we also, we use in Trello, and then as we moved other things out of Trello, we said, well, let's bring everything out of Trello and then move as much as we can consolidate it into Coda. So typically orientations, when you think about onboarding and what that process is, day one, this is what you do, day two. In my experience, it's always this, like a Word document that you fill out, you print out, and you give it to someone when they start. But the problem is if you want to make one change, it just becomes very difficult to maintain that change, right? So either you're crossing out on that piece of paper, or you're reprinting over and over again, or one day doesn't go as planned, so the events for day two need to get moved, but they're still just on a hard piece of paper, so it's not very flexible. And so we found a very nice solution to that to, one, help people that were using Trello or Coda into the system, but also manage their onboarding process that way. So I'll show you this. So again, we're looking at the board view here. And what we did was we sat down and we thought of what are all the things that onboarding should include, right? What are all the things somebody needs to know and learn as part of their onboarding process? So we grouped it into things such as access. What do they need access to, right? It's embarrassing when someone starts a job and they don't have access to most things within the first couple of days because, oh, I forgot that I need to do that, or I'm waiting on that, whatever it may be. So just to put that up front of mind, what does somebody need access to? Then all the one-on-one meetings, things that the people that somebody who's new should be meeting with, some of the systems review, so whether it's Teams or Coda or some of our online learning systems for Hyatt. Procedural review, how do you handle some certain situations? And then what are the trainings that we'd expect somebody to go through, right? So, New York, our colleagues need to complete the New York City anti-sexual harassment within the first X number of days of their employment. So we want to make sure that that gets started. So we put them all here. These are kind of the main categories, put them in different colors. And then we have a blank day 1 through 10. Typically we look at 10 days of orientation, right? So then what we do is we copy this for the individual who's starting, me, for example, and then we would distribute those across the days that we want them to do that. So let's say we get to day 2 and this person doesn't get to meet with the regional director of labor relations. I'll just slide it on to day 3 and now it's part of that day. Whereas if this was just a printed out agenda, which I know is nice to present to someone, it just becomes irrelevant really quickly as the plan starts to fall apart, right? So not only is this appealing to me at least, and a good way to get somebody into the system, I would sign up myself or the new person for Coda, show them how to use this here, and then they go in here, and as they go through each one of these, they can take notes and then mark it complete, so we know what's complete, and then kind of move the things that are left open, move it on to the next day if we didn't get to go through it. So we've gotten really good feedback from the people who have used this kind of system because they get to look at it on their phone and say, oh, what am I doing today when they start their day? And again, maybe the sheet falls apart or you're not scribbling all over the sheet, taking notes on there. And it's just a really easy way to stay fluid. Some of the other things that were cool about Coda that you can do here is the formulas on the canvas, right? So just one example here, which I couldn't really figure out how to do as I copy from a template and save the formulas because we changed the board name, but maybe one of you threes out there can show me how to do this. But in each one of these items, there's a complete. So when you mark it complete, the conditional formatting will change the title of the card to green, just to visually see that. But then it'll also start to add up all the completes and the outstanding items across the board, and then you can kind of get an idea of overall how are you doing. So not every card is really weighted the same way, right? Like getting your ID is not the same as completing a 3-hour training, but just to know what items are left or how close is somebody to having completed all the items. So, you know, I guess we would be able to just copy this formula into each new page that we make. But just the idea being here, you make a template of all the things that you want somebody to learn. And, you know, you can have this for various positions or all things for all positions and then pick and choose the ones you want. So not only can you drag and drop it, but you can just change it from what list it's on and drag it and just pick the list and it'll just move to that day. So it's very easy creating somebody's onboarding this way and saying, okay, I know everything they need to do. Let me figure out how it fits into the next 10 days. And then just some instruction up here on how to copy the board over and then, you know, use the duplicate data instead. So it's not a linked version of the table. So it's not copying every change you're making on there.
Very neat. I like the Trello, continuing the Trello board layout here. It's really nice. The color coding. Elaine had a question. Elaine, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. So I was wondering if like the correct way or an accurate way to understand what you've created here is almost like a combination of a wiki where you can come to one place to get all the information that you want, like all the context you want, but it's also like a much more interactive checklist, like making sure you have like all the access you need and you've done all the things that you need to do, like all your trainings and things. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, I remember like in a past life, I worked at Visa and I think my onboarding took 3 months just because it was scattered across like so many different like intranets and like different firewalls and different countries manage different parts. So this is just really cool to see it all in one place.
Thank you. It's less of a wiki than I think it probably could be or should be. You know, it'd be great if inside of each one of these cards was the detail about this topic. So whether it's you know, something like using Teams, right? Like what are the key features they need to use Teams with? I think this has just helped us say, okay, when you sit down with someone, this is the thing you have to go over. It's really not as detailed as it should be to say, these are all the functions of Teams that you need to know how to use, or these are all the functions of Coda that you need to know how to use. It's more of a, hey, make sure you get to talk about this. So I think over time it could and hopefully will evolve into that, is having that wiki and maybe even some sort of, you know, relation to another board that really has that data, so you can kind of connect it in as you select these things. But it's more so someone who's new is starting and they say, what are all the things I should know that, you know, we think make somebody successful in their role within the first couple of weeks to get them ready. And again, you can just add something to this. So it's really easy, where again, if you're doing like the Word document, which is kind of the thing I've always seen over the past, you know, 15, 16 years at Hyatt, it's just so hard to copy that and to, you know, make a new one for someone else. And, you know, which version am I using now? Did I add something onto this one that I can't use for someone else? So this is just a more general way to pick and choose what you want somebody to learn and make sure that you're not missing anything.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thanks. Heidi, I think you chatted in a question. I don't know. Do you want to ask it to Kevin?
Sure. In a past life, we had to do a lot of onboarding templates, and we definitely struggled. We definitely started with Word docs, Google Docs. The question I have, is there a way to, when we were setting up meetings, we would have a specific time. So is there a way on your calendar piece to say, okay, from 10 to 11, you're going to be in a meeting here? Or is it just listing what you have to do during the day and then they have to look at Google Calendar to know what times?
So because we're so Microsoft based, we really use Outlook. There are a few things that we use a Google Calendar for, a shared Google Calendar, not as much as I wish. And so maybe there is some Zapier or some automation way to get one of these cards with the time onto an Outlook calendar in Microsoft. But this isn't as designed for that. So typically what I would do is I would lay out the full 2 weeks for someone and then start going into the Outlook calendar in Microsoft and sending invites. And again, if something changes, then we just either move the card around or we just change the invite if it's the same day. But no, I don't unfortunately never link this up to a calendar. We would just kind of lay it out and then go send the invites afterwards, just to kind of piece it all together and help us visualize it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then I mean we do have like in Coda there's like a Google Calendar integration. We call them packs. So you can set up an integration if you want to like automatically schedule calendar invites from a Coda doc. But yeah, there's it's like a separate. You have to create a button, and there's some other settings you have to set up. But yeah, you can definitely take this to the next level and integrate it with Google Calendar. Sweet. Any other questions about this onboarding template? I've definitely seen so many different types of onboarding templates, and I think seeing the board layout is really useful because it's so easy for a new hire to be able to just like tap and move if they're like on their phone to see what they have to do. Better than like just a long scrolling Google Doc or something. Yeah.
A quick question.
Sure.
Is there a way to hide boards or lists that don't have anything in there? I know you can filter them out and do the eye thing, but is there a way to do that automatically?
I don't know, Kevin, did you have any use case for that?
To hide it, I think in my experience with Coda, and I'm probably doing it wrong, but I think certain columns get hidden if there's nothing inside of them by default, unless you say to decide to choose it. And I may not have that process correct, but I think if there's something, I'm not sure, I had to go into some of these and put something in them in order to make it visible to begin with. But I'm not sure if that's the best way to do that.
Yeah, Karina, were you talking about like if one of these cards should be taken away from the board, how you can hide it from the board?
Yeah, like I was thinking once you move all the cards into days, you don't necessarily want the first 3 to be there. So you can, do the little eye thingy and hide the column. But I was wondering if there was like a more automated way that, yeah, like that. Like if there's nothing in there,
yeah, you can
just
collapse
like
it
away or something. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the other thing I would do is just move these to the end so that the first one is day one. Just kind of drag these out to the end, or if they're empty, you could just delete them, not from the template one, but from the individual one. So if I cleared out all the actives, I would just get rid of this list because there'd be nothing in it. So once I distribute all the tasks, then I could just delete the list, but you could also just collapse it this way.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I don't know, Kevin, if you do this in your thing, but when you mark something as complete, does that remove the card from the list?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't. Sort of by design, in other areas, you'll see that I do that, but I want somebody to be able to reflect and easily access their notes so that, so many of our conversations are linked together, right? So talking about one thing may reference another thing, and I just want somebody able to reference their own notes and look back and say, look at all the things I did today and make sure that, yes, everything in this day's list is complete and I don't have to move everything over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another option is if you, what Kevin could have done is like and this again, depending on like how you want the workflow to work, is like if you click complete, then you filter this layout to remove anything that's like completed. Yeah, that's just another different type of option you can play with. Anyone else?
I had a question around kind of getting adoption as far as the industry specifically. Like I know there's a little bit of resistance towards like using technology and at an operational level to support certain workflows. So I guess my question is kind of two-pronged. One is, it sounds like you've had some good success on the front end getting new hires to kind of adopt and engage with the platform. I guess so. My question is that true? And are you able to find a way for them to own it? Like, is Coda easy enough to facilitate that? And then my second question is, have you had any experience yet where it actually informs future workflows or organizations within Hyatt that people are actually starting to adopt it for their own process?
So the new hires are much more open to these platforms because this is the only way they know, right? So trying to convince someone who's been doing it a different way for 15, 20 years is a little bit harder to get them. I'm lucky enough to be in a position in my department in human resources where I'm able to influence people on how we should do processes. And usually I slowly start to show them one thing. So, oh, what if we did it this way, right? And they say, oh, well, we could also do this in Coda. Or what if we move this process into Coda as well, right? So I try and find the thing that needs the biggest fix and say, oh, I think I know how we can do that. And I try to get them involved too and say, what do you think? Or how should this look? Or here's a few different ways. Which way do you think would be best? So I try to influence. Unfortunately, I do have a reputation of always having another tool, right? So somebody will say, oh, what's the next thing that we're going to be using in HR? And so it's a bit of a stigma with me, but I think it's just for the benefit of evolving our process and having a better experience for our colleagues and the colleagues that we serve ultimately through our different functions. So in terms of other hotels, I think whenever I can, I'll show off our techniques. And I think, especially when we were using Trello, it was well received by some other hotels, and some other people have used those things more on an individual basis. It is really hard for a company our size to just adapt a process company-wide that, maybe works really well for New York City with our, complex relationship with the hiring process and our labor environment, as well as having multiple hotels in a really small area with an area structure. It might not work for Wichita, Kansas, a Hyatt out there. So I try to just focus on, what can my team do the best? And, people do get glimpses of it as they come out and they change positions and they transfer into our ecosystem of tools and processes. And it's, I like to think that, we're very evolved in how we work.
Great, thanks for that.
Yeah, I guess piggybacking off that question, have you found certain roles of other colleagues that have made it easier, that they have found it easier to pick up Coda Doc versus other roles? Like maybe I'm guessing folks in operations might find this pretty easy to use versus other roles.
Yeah, there are some operational positions that really benefit from a platform like this, and I haven't spent as much time trying to convince people to change their process, especially since I'm no longer in that operation, right? I'm no longer the executive housekeeper, and so that person really doesn't want to hear how I would do it if I was still in the position. So I try to respect that as much as I can. But our human resources team is really, really deeply connected with our operations team, and we face a lot of challenges together, and so we'll put them into our system sometimes to say, well, this is where this information is going to be, or this is where we're going to track this process. So a lot of our labor relations tracking was in Trello. It'll eventually move into Coda as we reopen our hotels and resume operations. But when our colleagues that are not in HR get to see us using these sort of platforms, I think it's exciting for some of them because it looks cool. It's, you have everything in one place. And it's just such a big difference from just having one Word document or one Excel document that, only one person can access at a time. And now you have 17 versions of that all over the place. So I'll show you one document next that would really have been great for the operations when I was still in there. But it really solved a huge problem that I'm happy to show you that might be helpful for some other hospitality folks.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Do you mind if I ask a quick question about what the issue was with Notion and Hyatt, and how Coda doesn't have that issue?
Yeah, it got blacklisted by our corporate team, just saying this domain is no longer accessible on network computers, and
for no reason.
They wouldn't share the reason, but it's also scary sometimes to reach out and say, hey, I'm hosting all this information on this platform that you may not approve of, so can I have access to it back? So that's why I try and learn from that when I look at Coda and, you know, the next, whatever the next evolution is, right? If it's in the Microsoft ecosystem, it's great, but the Microsoft ecosystem doesn't solve all of our needs.
Right. No, I was just curious because how do you know? I mean, I don't know what the issue was, but how do you know that the issue doesn't exist with Coda as well? I don't know what.
Yeah, it's a bit of a risk to, you know, keep investing in these platforms and putting information in there. You know, ultimately everything's web-based, which is great. So I could always, you know, log in from a personal computer and start to extract the data that I need. And, you know, I can still access Notion from my personal computer and I can, you know, go retrieve all that information as I need. Sometimes I do go back and reference it. But, you know, the longer you're in a system like this, the more the information you need is in a system like this.
And do you back this up at all, like to Google Sheets or?
No. We've been busy the past few months with the COVID, so probably not as much as I could or should be. So maybe I'll add that to my to-do list.
Yeah, and you can always export stuff from your docs. Hopefully this won't happen, but if Coda gets blacklisted at Hyatt Corporate, you can always export into like a CSV and dump that into Excel file or Google Sheets. So yeah.
Yeah, don't tell anyone at Hyatt that I'm doing this. So I'll show you this room inspection page that I made, and it was just a replica of a problem that I faced many years ago. So when I was the executive housekeeper, we had this challenge at another hotel that'll remain unnamed, but it had a lot of rooms and we just didn't have a good grasp on what was in each room, right? So whether each room had a shower tub or just a shower stall, right? So in terms of guest preference, which room has what, right? Also in terms of quality control, which room needs a new couch covering, which room needs a new desk chair. So all these questions we just didn't have in one spot, and we didn't have a good platform to collect all that data and then organize it to say, okay, let's inspect every room and then say, okay, what are the worst room numbers that we need to really look at and say, okay, these rooms are in bad condition. We need to invest some time and money into cleaning and revamping it, and to make sure that we're not putting our most valued guests into those rooms. So we spent many $1,000s, another hotel, not the ones I'm at now. We spent many $1,000s working with a company to develop what you see here for free in Coda, which was basically a custom room inspection. It had like 120 questions that we worked with them on, saying, you know, I want to inspect all these points in a guest room, and then I want to be able to gather it and analyze it and say, what's the best floor, what's the worst floor, you know, what types of rooms are having these issues, or how many chairs need to be replaced so I can figure out how much money do I need to budget for chair replacement. So that's all crucial information for running the operation and as you do budgeting. But natively, I'm not sure that many companies have something like that. And so just thinking about how Coda solves that solution, it was just so easy to make a table and just kind of put in those questions there. So some of the basic information is the room, what floor it's on, selecting what type of shower does it have a couch or it doesn't have a couch, does it have a desk or it doesn't have a desk. You know, I'll give you an example. The Grand Hyatt New York has 1,298 rooms, but there's 157 different room configurations. So you never really know what you're going to get until you walk into every room and say, okay, this room has this. So it's challenging to kind of get a grasp on that without proper tools and systems. So creating something like this, which is accessible on a mobile device, so any manager who would already be in that room doing a room inspection can just pull it up, select the room they're in, and then kind of fill out these questions. And if there's a problem in the room, they can just click this button for email, and it'll launch an email to the engineering department, for example, or whatever predefined email is in there, tracking when it was last inspected. So I can then look at all the rooms and say, when was the last time this room was inspected? If it's been too long, I know I need to get to that room, right? And then these buttons here where I can select what is the quality or the condition of a shower or the carpet quality or the chair condition. By selecting these, I can then do some math to add up to this score, which is a formula here. So then I can say, okay, what rooms have the best score? What rooms have the worst score? And then kind of detail it by that. So if a room has a bad score, I may want to spend more time deep cleaning or investing money in replacing furniture. So having the view like this is really great to just kind of click through and see it, but then filtering and saying, show me the rooms with the lowest scores, right? So in this case, show me a room that has a 4 or lower. And then I know these are the rooms I need to focus on, you know, over the next month to get up into good condition. So, you know, something like this honestly costs, you know, over $5,000 to have another company make, and I made it for free in Coda. And it's just such a great example of how flexible Coda is and for multiple different situations. And it's something I made on my own. I didn't need to hire a contractor and work with them with emails back and forth and contracts and licenses. We had to license devices to use FileMaker Pro at the time, where again, this is a free process for anyone to pull up on their phone. Any questions on that, Al?
Yeah, I one question that came up to me was like when you mentioned like you spent $1,000 on a more bespoke solution. Like this seems like such a simple doc, but I'm curious, like I mean, you have the inside knowledge about this. What do other hospitality groups use as their main software for this pretty critical use case of like inspecting room quality?
Yeah, you know, I've only worked for Hyatt, so I only know our system, but
Okay.
traditionally this would look like an Excel sheet, which again is copied over and over and saved as because somebody was in it when you went to do when you went to fill it in, or somebody's writing it down on paper to then enter into a spreadsheet, but they don't get time to do it. So now you're backed up on all these, these sheets of paper lying around, and then you don't know when the last time somebody inspected, and it's not designed the way you want it to say, okay, I need all of this information to make sure somebody fills out the right way, and then being able to do something with it.
Mm-hmm. I guess like bubbling up, were you able to demonstrate more efficiency to whoever is like wants to look at this? Like we've been able to inspect X number of more rooms. We're able to provide better rooms to our VIP clients. Like we're able to draw any efficiency gains and present that to anybody from this?
With the company that made the solution that's very similar to this, that did make a huge difference for us in being able to target what are the biggest opportunities. I think this would, again, prove the same value, if not more, because we can continue to customize it in real time on our own. So I can say, show me the floor that has the best score, show me the floor that has the worst score, and just kind of continue to filter it however I want, which I think most standard tools that somebody has from a business don't offer that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to the access or permissions on this kind of documents? I don't know enough about Coda to really understand the intricacy there, but if someone leaves the company, for example, are you able to turn off their access to the information? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so we as the doc creator in this case, I invite individuals as we kind of ease them into the system, and so if they were to leave the company, we remove them. And I went through that with Trello as well, where we had 20 team members and we had well over, I don't know, maybe like 50 boards just across multiple functions. And unfortunately, we saw some reduction in our workforce over the past few months, and so we had to go in and remove each person individually. So I don't know that there's maybe a better team control, or Al, there's some other features that I'm not utilizing to the full extent.
Yeah, there's so Kevin has been doing all this on Coda's like replan. So you can just share and unshare docs as necessary. When you like go to like the team or enterprise plans, like there's a lot more custom controls you can provide to like different groups and teams within your company.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really like this cover image, by the way, for
carpet.
Yeah. Any other questions about this room inspection doc?
I had one. Is the historical information on the condition of rooms important here? Or is that not really something that you care to keep track of?
It's probably not that useful in terms of a room inspection system. At least in my experience, I think what we do is helpful here is just when was the last time it was inspected. That's helpful, again, just to know, oh, we haven't been in this room in a while, right? Has the condition degraded over time because we haven't been in there? Do we need to take some sort of action? I guess that's really the only value, is knowing when was the last time we looked at it. But in terms of, do you mean like creating an entry for every room inspection?
Well, yeah, so I don't know your business, so I was just curious whether that was valuable to you, and whether you had attempted it or wanted to do it, or felt that it would even be worth the effort.
Yeah, I think one way to handle that in terms of just locking in that information is I could just create a copy of this form or this table to kind of say, okay, this is what we did in March, right? Make a new table for March, and then create a blank one for April, and then kind of compare month to month, what happened in each month, how many inspections did we get. So you could kind of keep creating it. That would take up a number of rows each time. And like I said, the Grand Hyatt has almost 1,300 rooms. So it would start to get a little clunky maybe, but that's one way to preserve that information, I think.
Yeah, another option is Kevin, if you expand one of the rows again, it's not a super visible thing, but if you click on activity in the bottom right there, this will show every single time someone has changed a value in that given row. So if someone changed the shower condition today and then changed it a week later, you would see those updates here in the activity.
Boom, there it is.
Yeah.
You add pictures into these cards?
I'm sorry?
Can you add pictures into the cards? So if you have one for the carpet quality, maybe you have an image of the quality of the carpet and why it's scored so low?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Alice, there's maybe using Google Drive is the best integration for that. I don't know. Can I just take a picture right through that?
Yeah, I actually haven't tried this on a mobile device, but you can have a column that stores pictures. So if anyone here is coming from the world of Airtable, like you can store pictures inside a column, you can do the same thing in Coda. I haven't personally tried taking a picture on a mobile device and then storing in a column. But these tables definitely can have pictures in them. Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions?
So both of the views were just filters, or did you actually have formulas? I think I saw one of them was a filter, but this one I'm not sure if it's a filter or formula.
So sorry, this one is a filter of a formula, I think. Where did I go?
You click on the filter to the right.
Yeah, I thought I had it.
There you go. Yep.
I don't know what filter I have here. So it was if the carpet quality was 1 or less.
Okay.
So that was the filter. The other one I think had a formula for the interactive filter.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is just an interactive filter, so I can select which level of scores I wanted to see as an overall room score, which is adding up each one of these.
Nice.
Yeah, I didn't realize there's 257 room configurations in the Grand Hyatt. I always assumed they're all the same.
No, it's a very old building. It was built over 100 years ago. So even though there's been renovations, it's just kind of working within the confines of the structure of the building.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Cool. Yeah. Any other? I mean, Kevin, I know you have a bunch of other docs, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But if there's other docs you think are worth sharing, feel free to talk about. I think some of the ones that you create around COVID could be interesting to.
Oh, sure.
Know. Yeah.
So, one of the things that we really focused on coming into the situation where we're not face-to-face with our colleagues every day like we typically were, and knowing that, our colleagues are of varied age, and some of them have been working at the same hotel for 40 years, which is super respectable, and I envy that, that it might be challenging for them to be home in a situation like this. And so we really wanted to do our best to keep in touch with people. And so we were tracking just what our frequency of communication was and what our platform of communication was, just to make sure we're staying up to date with things and making sure we're hitting people in different platforms. So, this is just an example of our communication tracker of when we maybe sent an email, or when we posted something on our bulletin board, or when we posted something on our app, or when we held a town hall. So it's just a way to see what have we been doing over the past couple of months, and make sure, if somebody were to come back and say, hey, you never reached out to us, we can at least go back and validate that, or say, well, these are all the things we did, and maybe it wasn't sufficient, or maybe the emails were not very helpful. So we can kind of go back and say, let's focus more on the other things. Here's a little kind of a wiki on how to use CallFire. So CallFire is it's actually a call marketing system, but we've found some really, really good use with it as just a mass distribution of text messages or voice messages. So if there was updates to the hotel, or just sending a message from our general manager to all of our employees, we would use this website called CallFire. And then just, you can do a text broadcast or a voice broadcast. So here was just kind of a nice checklist for someone to know how to do it, which is, the pictures and the collapsing and just kind of a step-by-step on how to go through that process if I were not available to be the one to handle that communication at the time. So just a nice, good resource there. And then our care calls, as we call it. So just the employee ID, no employee name here, nothing too HIPAA worrisome, but just keeping track of the employees when we called them and if we spoke to them or not. So we're taking notes inside of them. Again, nothing too crazy about their personal health, but just saying that we spoke to them, they said everything was fine. And we go through these calls throughout the week. We're just constantly cycling through our employees and saying, okay, did we speak to everyone? Let's start over and call everyone again and just see how they're doing, see if they have any questions. And then here's just another view of that care call, just broken out, so you can kind of click through and just see each person, what their notes are. And then here's just a chart that we were looking at just to say, did we speak to them, yes or no? And just to get an idea of how successful were we in terms of actually getting in touch with our colleagues. So nothing too fancy here, just a yes, no from the column from the original table, but just a nice way to say, how did we do today? Hopefully more than less we were able to speak to. And then drafts, nothing too fancy here, but this was just a way for us to work on communication together from, being remote working. And so if we said, okay, we're going to send an email for Mother's Day, what does that look like? So, we put something together, somebody goes in and edits it, and then we kind of piece it together there. Just a nice way for us to stay connected through that platform.
Yeah, Diane, did you want to ask a question about the timestamp?
Yeah, just going back to the screenshot prior where you had the employee numbers, I was just wondering if there's a way to automate that so that every time you make an entry, it automatically gives you the date and time.
Yeah, there is a way right now. So I have a button here that says new entry. It's not so much for the time. I think it might actually not have the date in it. Let me see. New row added. I have it autofill in the date. So that button, it creates a new row in the card and it fills in today's dates. And then I go in and fill in the other information. There would be another nice way to automate the information from each employee, where if I had another table that this was linked to and made some sort of relation, where I just choose their employee number, then it brings in their phone number and their name and whatever else I need. But again, as Al said, we're still on the free version for now. We're kind of limiting our expenses since we have no revenue coming in. So we're not taking up too many rows with our 2,000 employees' contact information. But that's the beauty of the button here, which I just really love the simplicity of the buttons on the canvas here. And then we have it highlight green for the day that we're in, so we know who we spoke to today.
Do you keep track of when your colleagues call in or request to talk to someone, or is that not tracked here?
It's not tracked here. We have, some shared email inboxes, some shared hotlines for employees to call into. Okay. So typically if we call them back, we'll track that conversation just so we know that that person, is okay, and we'll kind of talk to them as, besides handling their requests, just kind of check and see how they're doing, see if they have any other questions, but just to know that they're okay and, we can check them off our list of people to get in touch with.
Gotcha.
And then I guess the last thing I can show you is my to-do list, which is a variation of the Eisenhower Matrix, which was like, I'll never forget the day I learned about the Eisenhower Matrix. This is super nerdy, but I just felt like a weight lifted off my shoulder because I had a to-do list of like 40 things, and I was like, I don't even know where to start. And then just, again, it started in Trello, but I had 4 lists in Trello for each of the quadrants of the matrix, and just kind of spreading it out and saying, where do I start? It was just such a relief. And so I've been using this process for a couple of years now, but really you're just dividing each item into 4 different categories. The original Eisenhower Matrix was a little different than this, but I kept all the words with the letter D. So either do something I need to do, something I need to decide when I'm going to do it, meaning it's not that urgent, but I have to do it. Delegate, meaning someone else is handling it, but I want to track and make sure it gets done, or something I can follow up on. And then delay, meaning I can't act on it now, or I need to, wait for for a future date to take some action on it. So every time I make an item here, I use one of the buttons to pick that priority. So I can hit do and it'll just fill in the do, which is great. And then I can go through this and fill in the information I need. These are just the fields that I use that are mostly hidden on there. But the hotel, just so I know what hotel I'm focusing on, I mark things as an accomplishment if it was like a big task. So at the end of the year, typically if you have some sort of annual review process, your boss might say to you, what were your accomplishments this year? So when I had a really big task that I worked on or something I was really proud of, I'll mark it as an accomplishment so I can then go back later and filter, show me just accomplishments when it's time for me to do some sort of self-evaluation. So I have that there, and then I also have the One Big Thing, which is like a self-help productivity book. I think it's called The One Big Thing. But just when you say, okay, what's the one thing I have to do today? So if I wanted to just say, okay, the one thing I have to do today is upload schedules, then I can filter down to just show me the one, just the one big things that I really need to be working on, even though maybe more than one thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a book called The One Thing by The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was a good read. I just gave you the summary of it, but that was basically it. Figure out what you need to do today and then do that.
Or in this case, big things, plural.
Yeah, big things. So that's kind of my to-do list, and I'll just move things around throughout the day, and come August 31st, I'll move this milestone project up to the do list, and when it's time for me to sit down and work and I have a few minutes to actually work on things, this is where I start. I know exactly where to look, and this becomes my priority for the day. So it's just really nice to have that targeted focus there, and the color coding. I like colors, so that helps.
Yeah.
The other thing I have down here is kind of like a daily duties, as I call it, but it's just very straightforward. It's just saying, did I do this? Did I check the group emails? Did I talk to the people on my team? And I don't use this information for anything other than in the day, I want to make sure that I connect with these people and make sure I talk to them and just check off these things. So this is filtered down to today. It only shows today, but there's, months, 104 prior days in there of just me clicking through the things that I wanted to accomplish for that day. It's more of just like a daily reminder than it is a to-do item. And it's just a visual way to say, oh, I didn't speak to Frank yet. Let me make sure I connect with Frank today.
Do you manually add a new date? Because I don't see like any, or is there an automation that's adding every new date?
It's filtered. So I'll add months at a time. You can just like copy and paste from, I'll make like an Excel list and then copy and paste it in here. But then I have it filtered to just show today. Because I don't really care about what happened yesterday or who I didn't talk to or did talk to yesterday. I just want to know today, what was I able to do, or make sure that I spoke to everyone. So it'll only show me today's column, or rows rather.
Is there a way to create, like, to use that like line and make it a template and then just automate it, like adding every day?
Yeah, I could create a button that'll make a new row. I find it easier to kind of list out a row in Excel for 30 days or 2 months, and then just copy and paste it once, and then I just filter it. So with the way I just described, I get weekends in there and things like that, which is probably not helpful because I'm not looking at this so much on the weekend. But to your point, yeah, I can make a button that just adds a row for that day. Okay. But if I forget to add the button, or if I get to click the button, then I'm already behind the schedule.
You can actually automate to click a button.
Oh, okay. I think I might want to do that then.
Yeah, you just have that set to run every single morning at 9 a.m.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
As an automation. Okay, that makes sense. Maybe I'll work on that. I do have a couple of automations in here. So like I said earlier, that certain payroll reminders, certain deadlines, they auto-populate in here with today's date or the today +1 or whatever it is. So I know that becomes my priority.
Cool. And Stephanie, you had a few questions about Kevin's to-do list. Do you want to come on mic and ask him?
Yes, I was just wondering, I see that you have like a due date. So kind of a two-part. Is it possible to link these items into a calendar that you could, look at it, have a calendar view and see what's due at some time, kind of switch between this and that? And then on that same note, is it possible to have like a reminder date on any of these before the due date?
So I'll speak to my knowledge, and maybe Al, you can jump in. But what I could do is set that the color here changes as it gets closer. So I have it red if it's expired. I could say, you know, go yellow the day before it's due, just as a visual reminder. But then, yeah, you could turn this into a calendar view, and it'll show those dates. I just, I don't personally get a lot of value out of that, but I know that that's helpful for some people to view it that way.
Okay. And then also, are you able to like copy or link like an email or a document into one of the to-do tasks as an attachment?
I could, and I'm not sure I have it here. No, I didn't have it here, but one of the other docs, I have the pack integration for Google Drive. And so I'll connect certain documents that are valuable there. I just, I haven't needed that for this so much.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a note about the reminders is a pretty common pattern I've seen with to-do lists is if you want to remind yourself about something that's coming up, like if upload schedules right here in Kevin's task list is due soon, like you can set it's another automation where you it sends an email like 2 days before the due date, and you get an email, you can get a Slack message or whatever, and just say, hey, Kevin, like this task is coming up in 2 days. Please go to your Coda doc and reprioritize or whatever. So I've seen people use the Gmail pack integration to like send themselves an email reminder that something's coming up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions about to-do lists? I know people have very strong feelings about how they manage their to-do list, so it's always interesting to see different systems in place. Awesome. So I had this meeting going until 7, but if there's anything else people wanted Kevin to talk about or discuss, we can keep it pretty open for the remainder of the time. Yeah, anyone have any last comments or questions?
I had a question about, Kevin, did you find it most useful to watch the tutorials or to look at other people's templates and workflows? I think you mentioned that you had emailed support for some formulas. Could you talk a little bit about sort of your trajectory and learning?
Yeah, coming in from Notion, there's some similarities that come over. So it helped me just understand maybe some of the framework. But I watched a lot of the YouTube videos. Alan, is her name Marie, the one that does a lot of those tutorial videos?
Yeah, Maria. She is amazing.
Yeah, Maria. She's awesome. She's a lot of fun to watch, and she does a lot of videos that are kind of short snippets, but she also does some, really long interviews of people with some very complex systems. So it's always inspiring to watch some of those interviews that she does, and those tutorials are really super helpful.
Yeah, and I'll paste in a link in the chat. It's just coda.io/learn. That's a good place to start to find some of Maria's videos. Yeah, and go ahead.
No, go ahead. Are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just was wondering, Kevin, it seems like you really like Coda, you use it for your own personal tasks as well, you get it. But I'm wondering what your team feels about Coda, how they like onboarding with it, if they also kind of see the value and the fun and the magic of it that you do.
The number of team members that I have right now in Coda, I think they do see the value in it. Especially with some of the wikis that we've built, which I didn't share here because there's some confidential information. But just as a reminder for those processes, and this shutdown and the lockdown and the suspension of operations at our hotel has been surprisingly complicated for us in terms of steps that we have to follow from an administrative point, whether it's about unemployment or insurance coverage. And so there's a lot of new things that have come our way. And so documenting that in one spot has been super helpful to just have a reference and update it as we learn, right? So we're distributed across a number of hotels. And so, one person may encounter a challenge, but then share that answer. And it's like a blessing to be able to reference each other's notes for that. So I think just that cross communication, even though we're remote now, is just so valuable.
Awesome, thank you.
And do you always use the browser to, like with Notion, you can download their, I guess it's sort of like a desktop version, but it's not. Did you do the same thing with Coda, or do you always just go on to a browser?
I always do browser, and I have the little Coda extension up here so I can open another window. And I use the app pretty frequently on my phone to add to-do lists, whereas, you know, Notion's app is notoriously not great. So that was one of the things I was really lacking before I joined into the Coda world, was the app functionality, which is really seamless.
Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, I think there's actually back on the human onboarding doc, or not human onboarding, the employee onboarding doc that you walked through.
Yeah.
It's actually more a general question. Like, when you come across another like area HR colleagues like Word doc or whatever system they're using, and you compare it to like what you've created, like what goes through your mind in terms of like whenever I see something that's like not organized correctly, I'm just like, oh man, I can do this so much better if I just move this thing around and this data around here. Have you had that experience looking at other colleagues' systems?
Yeah, I've really worked on developing myself to filter those comments out from being like the first thing that spews out, because
yeah.
I know that's very off-putting and you know, sometimes insulting. And so
Sure.
I've had to learn to be much more sensitive to that. And so sometimes I'll slyly, after they're doing their thing, I may say, hey, would you be interested in seeing like how I do it, or another way to do it? I try to be very respectful of people's process, and you know, people will often say, oh, I know it probably cringes you to watch me do this thing in Excel or whatever it is that they're doing, but I respect that everyone has their own process and learns that it, you know, has a different skill set for different things. And so you know, I fill that role on our HR team for Excel things, or you know, organizational tools here, where other people have other amazing skills that I envy.
Mm-hmm. Great. I guess last question for me is like any new use cases that you're thinking about creating Coda docs for that we haven't talked about?
I feel like the answer is yes, but I don't remember what it is right now. I'm gonna have to look back. Not that I can reference right now, but actually, you know, there's one thing that I was working on was, you know, as I mentioned, each of our hotels has a different agreement with the union. So even a room attendant at one hotel may have a different rate of pay or a different, you know, set of responsibilities at another hotel. And so even down to the position, everything is variable, from the rate to everything. And so I was thinking about how to kind of create that into one table and then filter out the views for each hotel, just as a reference. Because one of the biggest challenges we have is that our jobs, and I'm sure everyone says this, but our jobs are pretty complicated with having to manage all the information across all the different functions. And so when a new team member joins the team, it's very easy to not have access to the information they need. And we've never really centralized that information. So, you know, just an example of this is that every year, each position in the union gets an increase that's already predetermined, but then there are some variables around that within each hotel. So again, a room attendant might make a different amount of money at different hotels. And so you need to know, well, what is their increase versus another increase at another hotel? And, you know, sometimes if you make a mistake, it can be very costly, where after a year, somebody realizes they haven't been paid correctly. And so you want to do everything you can to avoid that liability and make sure somebody's getting paid what they deserve to be paid. So kind of putting in the nitty gritty of what each hotel's side agreements are that are unique to their hotel, and kind of breaking it down to the position level is something that we don't have, but probably look to create using Coda.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like some really important information that should be centrally accessible to a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, anyone else have any other topics they want to discuss while we have Kevin here? All right. Well, Yeah, I want to first of all, thanks Kevin's. Appreciate Kevin coming on and sharing all of his Coda docs. This is definitely the most number of Coda docs we've demoed in a meetup so far. So thank you again, Kevin, for like not only turning all of your real Coda docs into ones you can present that don't contain this information, but of course just walking through all your different use cases and problems in Coda. Yeah, we'll be doing these monthly. I guess any last words from Kevin before we sign off?
No, thank you. It was fun to kind of recreate these and kind of clean up some of the things that I've been meaning to clean up. And so I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all. And, you know, if there's anything that makes your life a little easier that you learn from this, then I'll feel like I accomplished something.
Awesome. Yeah, and we obviously can't wait to have the hotels open up again here in New York. And actually, Kevin and I were talking right before the meetup started, but like when the bar downstairs opens next to the Andaz Hotel, you should definitely check it out. It's like one of the best like unhotel bars I've been to that doesn't feel like a hotel bar. And it's like right in Bryant Park. Really cool place. So can't wait for that to open up again. Yes, we'll have our next meetup there. Andaz Wall. Awesome. Catered by Hyatt. I don't know about that. Yeah, that's fine. All right, everyone. Well, thank you. Have a great night if you're on the East Coast, and we'll catch you next month. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.